The scene editor and layout gives you a big picture of your scene. It allows you to see all the items in your scene and do some manipulation with the items. I thought what we would do is take a look at a portion of the scene editor. So what I'm going to do is come over to scene editor dropdown. Now there's the classic scene editor, but we're going to work within the new scene editor and our standard scene editor. So I'm going to open the scene editor and let's focus on the items tab. Okay, so this is going to give us a list of everything in our scene, and I thought we could kind of explore the lay of the land here in the items tab. The first thing to notice is we've got our different columns, and the A stands for active. And if we'll come back to what this is all about, but I'm just going to list everything out. And you can see we've got a check mark by everything. That means that everything in the scene is active, which means that if it's something that would render, like an object, then it's going to render when we go to render. If we turn it off, well, it's not going to be active. So this is a quick way of taking objects in the scenes and making them inactive just by coming over here, and we can say we're going to take our helicopter and we're not going to make it active. Okay, you can still see it when it's inactive, but you won't be able to see it in the render. So I'm just going to do a quick render, and we don't have a helicopter. If I make those active and we do a render, we have a helicopter. So it's a quick way of working, and that's the active column, and you just have a check mark. It's either active or inactive. You have the next column, which is your visibility, and depending on your items will depend, the type of item will depend on what your options are. For a light, we've got a little dot here. If I uncheck it, it will no longer be visible. Okay, in the scene. So I'm going to go ahead and check that back. If we go over to cameras, well, we can have it so that you can't see the camera. Let me go to perspective view, and we've got our camera right over here. I'm just going to hide it so we don't see it. So what would we use that for? Well, when I'm rigging or animating and I don't need to see where my lights or camera are, well, I just hide them and lock them, and then they're out of the way. I don't accidentally select them. They don't get in the way. I get to focus on what I want to focus on. Okay, so that's a handy feature there. Now, when it comes to objects, we have different ways of displaying the object. I'm going to slide my view over here so we can see the helicopter, and we'll come over here and we're going to change it to bounding box mode. Okay, so all I'm doing is left clicking on the little icon, and I can choose the different view style that I want to work with. So I'm going to set this to, say, front face wireframe. Now, why would I want to do this? Well, again, if I'm working on an element in the scene and I don't really need to see all the other elements in, say, full texture mode, I can come over here and, well, I can hide it. Maybe I don't need to see it, or maybe I need the bounding box just so I can get an idea of where, say, buildings or this helicopter is, so my character doesn't walk into it. I have the ability to set it to any view style that I want to. Okay, and that goes for each. Each object can be independent of the view style that you have selected in your actual viewport. So that's a really handy set of options for your items in the scene. It's the visibility column, and we just have the ability to change how we're going to view our items. Okay. Next to that are our channels. So if we want to, or sorry, next to that is the lock column. So if we want to, we can go in and say, I want to be able to see the lights and have them active, but I'm going to lock them. Okay. And what that stops me from being able to do is select. I'm trying to select in the viewport and I can't select them. Now, it doesn't stop you from selecting them from any type of selection. If I come down here to lights, well, I just selected it, and we can see it's checked right over here. That item is selected. So what you're really locking when you use this lock feature is locking it from accidentally clicking on it in the viewport in your workspace. Okay, so again, when I'm rigging, I like to hide and lock my lights and cameras so that I don't accidentally select them. And this is where we would do that. Next to that is our channels column. If we want to see the channels for an item, we can just click and that little plus sign becomes a minus. We've dropped it down and we can see the individual channels for the item that we're working with. Okay. Next to that is a list of your items, lights, cameras, objects, and we've got it listed here. Now, right now we can decide how we're going to display these. If I click this title here, I can choose between sequence and we can drop it from top to bottom, bottom to top. ID, same thing. Name, same thing. I can click active, visibility, lock, channels. So I can choose the way I want these items displayed, in what order I want these items displayed. Okay. I can also, before I said, well, let me drop it to list view, I can also change it to hierarchy view. And the hierarchy view allows me to see the parent-child relationship, right? And all I have to do is click on this little arrow to drop down and I can see all the children of the parent here. Okay, and I can just collapse those. I also have a right-click menu that I can say select all items. Okay, I have different selection options, and depending on what I have selected is what my selection option is going to be. If I come up to ambient master and right click, now I have more selection options. I can select the child items, I can unselect the child items, I can select similar, I can select none. So all different types of selection options. I can also, when I have this selected, I have hierarchy. Now if you notice when I came over here and clicked, that's ghosted out and there's no options. But because I have hierarchy here, I can expand channels, collapse channels, expand child items. Okay, so now all the child items are being viewed. So don't forget about this right mouse menu, because we've got all kind of options. If I want, I can open up the motion options panel here for the item. I can open up the item properties panel. Okay. I can edit channels. I can rename right here. If I decide that I don't like the name of this light, I can go and rename the light. Okay. I can even come over here and say, you know what? I need to add a null object, and it'll be the same thing as going over to the items tab and adding a null. I can add an object, which will load an object, add a camera. We've got the different lights. Okay, I can clear items from my list. So I've got all kind of options that I can take advantage of when I right click and use the menu here. Okay, so that's one way of taking advantage of the items panel here, is using the right mouse button. So we've got list view, hierarchy view. I'm going to just drop that, or actually I'll leave that open. And I'm going to work with just these ambient lights right here, 1 through 4. And I don't need to worry about all the other stuff, so I'm going to hide everything else. It's still there in the scene, I just can't see it. This can come in really handy if you're, say you're animating a character and there's only, say, 12 controls that you use when animating a character. Instead of having to filter through, you could have hundreds of items in the scene. You could just hide the ones that you don't need, and then I can just work with these, and whenever I'm done, I just unhide. Okay, so this doesn't hide your selection, it hides whatever is unselected. Okay, it's a really handy feature for moving around in the window. Now, I just used one of the features by accident, which is the parenting feature. If you're in hierarchy mode and you want to do parenting, I accidentally clicked and dragged and parented to an item. So like if I want this item to not be parented to this item, I'll just click it, drag it over to the left, let go, and now it's no longer a child. If I want it to be a child, I'll just click and drag to it, and now it's a child. If you want to avoid doing any parenting, work in list view. Okay, That's just an option. It's a quick way of doing some parenting. So if I want the camera to be part of this ambient master, I'm just going to grab it, move it up, and now it's a child of the master. If I don't want it to be, I'll just move it to the left. Quick way of parenting. You can still go in the motion options panel and do it that way, but this is another way of working with that. Okay. Now, not only can we select items and hide and unhide them, we can also search for items. Okay. Say I'm looking for the helicopter and the helicopter blade, and I know the name of it, but I've got so many items in the scene, and I start scrolling down. I'm like, where is it? A quick way is to use the find, and I'm just going to type in MI. And it already starts to find it, but the more you type, the more accurate it'll be. So, but the only things in the scene with MI, let's actually back up. Actually, the only thing with capital M, no, there's some ambient in there, so I, and it limits it to this. Quick feature, there's no enter that you hit, you just start typing and it'll find it. And then once you find it, you can hide everything else, and now you're working with that. Okay, so the find feature is a pretty handy feature. Another handy feature is, let's grab these ambient, and there was, I'm going to grab these two lights as well. And say I do that, and I do that for like, I don't know, 30 items. But it could even be for 5 or 6 items, but it takes a while to find what you're looking for, and you're selecting it, and you finally get it, and then you go, man, I don't want to go through that selection option again. Well, I've got selection sets right here. So I'm just going to save this selection, and I'm going to call this lights, and hit OK. I'm going to deselect, come over to sets, and now it's in the list. There's 6 items. I grab it, hide what I don't want, then I do unhide, and then I come back over here and I can just select. So selection sets, super handy. Again, if you're going to be working on a scene, and one of the things that you do a lot when you're working on a scene is selecting items, and if you can quickly jump to what you need selected, it really does speed things up. So selection sets are key. You can also do filtering. If we come over to filtering, I'm going to go to options, and I'm going to filter something that has anything that has ambient in the name, and I'm going to ignore the actually I'm going to ignore the case, and I'm going to enable filtering, and you can already see it starts to filter. Okay, I can save this filter. I'm just going to give it a name for future use, because I can have as many filters as I want. Again, it's just another way to gain control over working with the scene editor and displaying what you want displayed. And I'm going to go ahead, I'll leave enable item filtering on, and I'm going to close this because I can always come up to filtering and disable it. I can also create filters for channel filtering as well as item filtering. Okay, so this is just a brief look at the working with the scene editor in the items tab. It's just so that you can gain full control over selecting and viewing what's in your scene, which will definitely speed up workflow and allow you to only work on the items and see the items that you want to see, and of course display or lock the items that you want to, including channels. Okay, so again, just a brief look at the items tab in the scene editor.